All right, man. So we're back.
We are back.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
So today is going to be one hell of an episode.
What clickbait title are we going with this time?
I don't know. I'll probably maybe something like these are the top 20 games of all time, and if you don't like them, you're a loser. How to not be a loser? Play these games.
It's got to be a little shorter.
Yeah. Something along those lines.
We got goldfish attention spans now, so yeah.
If you're just tuning in, we are the New Games Plus podcast, and we are
New Game Plus. So we are a retro video game store and coin-op arcade located in Kingston, New Hampshire. We are open every day except Monday, 11 to 7, 160 Main Street, Unit D. Come on by and check it out. It's awesome.
This place definitely rules, and I'm John. If you're tuning in, I do the social media here at New Game Plus, and spend a lot of money here. That's what I do.
Yeah, and I'm Brendan. I'm the guy behind the counter. You'll see me if you're here. So, nice to meet you. Come on by.
And today, we are getting into a topic that I don't want to say we've been holding off on, but this is definitely one of those big. This is a big episode.
This is a big episode, and I think we need to sort of talk about it before we even get into it, because people hear top 10 list and they're thinking, you know, these are the critically acclaimed best games of all time. And personally, when I wrote my top 10, I didn't go that direction. I can't speak for you on this whole thing, but I went more towards games that either had an impact on my life as a gamer or sort of how I think video games should be.
Okay. And to counter that, for me personally, I went with games that have stood the test of time for me, games that I can always go back to and play, regardless of what console generation we're in, how many decades have passed. These are the games for me that if I were on like a deserted island, like I would always find a place in my heart for these games and would always play them. And to me are just sort of like the pinnacle of what we always talk about, where it's like, is something just nostalgia glasses because you liked it, or is it actually like a good game that just continues to hold its weight over the years?
Right.
So that was, for me, that was sort of my criteria, and it was hard.
It was hard.
This was hard. So
yeah, and just for myself to try to narrow it down a little bit, I did try to avoid games that we've talked about in our previous episodes. If you haven't seen it, John and I talk a lot about, we did our top 5 Mario games, top Metroidvania games of all time. So if you're going to yell at me and say this game should be on your list because it's right up your alley, make sure you watch those ones first, because it might be, but I'm limiting myself that way just to make things easier for myself. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. And if, just to give you like a heads up, this is going to be a long episode. We might turn this into a 2-parter, we're not sure. But it's going to be a long episode, and if you're just interested in hearing what our top games of all time are, we're going to have time codes on the chapters and the description, so you can just kind of click to your favorite parts and just hear those if you want to. But part of what we're doing here is also getting into discussion. So what's going to make this fun and unique is Brian and I are, hardcore gamers. Between the two of us, we've got like 70 years of gaming, and we've played thousands of games between the two of us.
Way too many.
It's way too many.
Yeah.
So the idea is to have a conversation about like what our favorite games are of all time and why. So to me, that's going to be the fun part of this.
Exactly. Yeah, you can see a top 10 list anywhere, Yeah. So I'm more interested in knowing what your top 10 is and why, and I want to share how I came to mine, not XYZ, these are the 9.9s on IGN all time or something.
Yeah.
So
we haven't talked to each other about this.
We haven't. We've been trying really hard not to talk to each other about it. And I think another thing that bears mentioning is I feel like on any given Sunday, it could be a different list of top 10 for me.
Yeah.
At least 7 or 8 of them when I was going through, I was trying to say, well, is this one or that one, So I just sort of locked in and said, we'll go with this now. But, it's one of those things where it's like, if you're a very, movie person, you can't say I have one favorite movie. It could be 8 or 9 that are still that top slot.
And similar to my top movies of all time, like this was very, just like you said, where it's like, I could put any number of substitutions in there for that list that wouldn't mean they're not my top 10 anymore, but I just have so many that I like that choosing like out of the thousands of games that we've played, like choosing a top 10 favorite it was way harder than I would have thought.
Oh yeah.
And you know, I've got a few extras that I might want to mention just at the end because
throw them in whenever.
it was so hard to not throw them in.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, let's kick things off. Why don't you start with your top 10? And these also are in no particular order.
No,
it's just kind of our personal top 10 each, no particular order.
It was hard enough to get 10. So yeah, no order. So the first or 10th, whichever way here. I'm going to say Virtual On Cyber Troopers.
Interesting.
Yeah. It was a... Are you familiar with Virtual On at all?
It was an arcade game, right?
It was an arcade, and it was on Sega Saturn.
Sega Saturn, yep.
Which was known for being like a very good port machine for that golden age of Sega.
Yeah.
I was introduced to it when I was... because I'm a few years younger than you. So when the Saturn came out, I remember being at a Sears, and they had one set up on an end cap,
Nice.
and I was playing Virtual On, and I got hooked.
Next mission, ruins. Get ready.
Just a great game all around, and then as I got older, my first job was actually at a coin-op arcade.
That's awesome.
And the reason I wanted to work there is because they had a Virtual On machine.
What arcade was it?
It was down, are you familiar with the Liberty Tree Mall?
Yeah.
In Danvers?
Yeah.
They used to have an arcade. It was part of the FYE. We were really dating ourselves.
That's
with this
crazy,
conversation.
FYE for your entertainment.
Yeah, for your entertainment. They had, the front half was, you know, the CDs and the movies and the DVDs and everything. And then they had a whole, like, 80, 90 machine
That's
arcade.
crazy.
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
That's neat.
Yeah. It was like if you were going towards the movie theater. It was like on the way to the movie theater in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Now, I know like Virtual On has like a huge following. It's one of those games I never played, admittedly. I never saw it in any arcades that I went to, and I was kind of more of like a fighting arcade guy myself. But I know the port for the Saturn is supposed to be pretty good too.
It is very, very good. Very good port. The only thing that you're losing is when you're playing in the arcade, it's a double stick to control. So you really do feel like you're in like a mech. You got this nice cockpit. There's double-sided glass between you and your opponent, so you're like locked in this thing. And it is a fighting game, but it's, you know, 3D from behind the view of your mech, and you're fighting the other person one-on-one in like a cityscape. So
that's interesting. I thought it was a shooter, like a kind of like an on-the-rails shooter kind of thing. No,
it's one-on-one fights the whole time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Are there like fatalities or anything in that?
There's like special moves and stuff. So if you're like, the way the control scheme works is your right trigger is one attack, your left trigger is a different attack, and then both together is a third attack.
Huh.
And then you turn by going like that or that. You jump, pulling them apart. You can dash with the top buttons and everything. So
that's cool.
Yeah, it's a one-on-one, you know, just fighting robots. And then if you're, you know, playing the single player, you're just doing the same thing.
Now, what is it about that game in particular that like makes it one of like the best games of all time for you?
The reason, I mean, just because it was so influential to me, and like how, like, I still fix arcade games as like a daily thing that I do.
Yeah, here at the shop.
I'm at the shop.
Don't you guys have a Virtual On here at the shop?
We don't. No.
What is the one you have here?
We have Metal Slug.
You have Metal Slug, but I could have sworn you had like a mech.
Revolution X. We don't have, no.
Huh? I could have sworn you had a.
Yeah, I
mech
wish
shooter.
if I could find one, and if anyone out there is selling a Virtual On machine, like, hit us up in the comments because I'll buy it. Because I would definitely make room for that in the back.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's why, like, that's kind of why I let off with that one. Because these aren't, like I said, the top 10 greatest games, like, based on any number of criteria. It's my top 10 greatest games.
Yeah.
So that one definitely got there because, one, it, you know, introduced me to working on arcade machines and doing all that sort of stuff and getting into that at like the end of the arcade era, really.
Yeah.
And then it also introduced me to the Saturn, which is one of those consoles that if you had one, you played with one, like, it's near and dear to your heart. And if you didn't, you just missed it, you know, so.
Yeah. The Saturn was a very underrated console. Yeah, that's a good choice, man.
Yeah. So what about fire it away?
Well, if you're going to start with an arcade, I was going to start with something else, but I'll match your arcade love. My first pick would be Mortal Kombat 2.
Okay. Which we actually do have.
You do have
in
that
the next
here.
room. Yeah.
I think Mortal Kombat, the original, came out in '92.
Sounds right.
And the first one I loved. I didn't play the first one as much in the arcade, though.
Okay.
The Genesis version was the one that I had and was like I played the hell out of.
Yep.
And, you know, Mortal Kombat 2 was, like, when that came out, I was 13. That game was, like, made for a 13-year-old. And I loved that game. I would go down to, we had a Dream Machine arcade down in the Methuen Mall in Massachusetts.
Yep.
And every day, like, I would just go down there after school and just
dump quarters.
put a quarter on the machine and just kick the hell out of people.
Oh, yeah.
Get the hell kicked out of me.
Right.
And it was fun because, like, arcades in, like, 1993, 1994 were like a community. Like,
Yeah.
You'd go there and there was like unwritten rules.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the put the quarter up.
Yeah.
That's, you know,
It
you're
was
next.
awesome. You're next.
Yeah, you're claiming next up.
It was the best. Like, it was just sort of like, it's the closest thing. Like, the closest thing I can think of to, like, an arcade scene now would be, like, a gym, where, like, at the gym there's, like, you know, there's just, you know, there's rules. Like,
Right.
there's unspoken rules.
Yeah.
And there was, like, I loved that consideration, and I loved the camaraderie in an arcade. And Mortal Kombat 2 was, like, the first game that I was just, like, I knew all the finishing moves, everybody's moves. Like,
Yep.
it didn't matter which character it was.
Fatality.
I had like this copy of like EGM that had screenshots for when it was coming out onto the consoles,
Yep.
and I would just look at it every day and just wait until the release date. And back when you were a kid, like it seemed like it took forever to get.
Everything takes forever.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So it was like I would just get so excited about it, and like I would look at the comparison of the pictures, and like I knew the subtle differences in like the health bar. Like in the Super Nintendo version, the name isn't in the health bar, and
Yep.
like all these little things, and I just couldn't wait for it to come out. And to this day, that's still like I still think it is the best fighting game ever made. And I know you're a Street Fighter guy.
Oh, yeah.
You and I are the classic rivalry.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it doesn't... I just don't like the control screen, but this is your dream fighting game, so I can appreciate it because, like you said, that camaraderie, just the fact that you don't know who's coming up and how good they're gonna be, and it might be some little kid and he beats the living snot out of you, and pulls off some moves that you've never seen before. Or you see some, older kid who's probably only, 17, but you're 12.
Yep.
So he looks like he's, 100 years old.
Yeah.
And you just destroy him.
Yeah, and that's exactly, like everything you just described is exactly it. And like what was cool then too is like there was no internet.
Right.
So like all the moves that you learned, you would find them out via someone at school, or a magazine might have one, or someone like called a hotline, and
or the kid keeps using them against you, and you're really annoyed because he won't tell you, so you're kind of looking over when he's like, putting in the fatality or whatever, so that you can do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and like that game still to this day is, I still love it. I have a Mortal Kombat 2 arcade machine in my home.
Yep.
I play it all the time,
Nice.
and I can still beat the crap out of it in one quarter. And one of the things I like to do now is like, even though I own it, when I go to an arcade, I always look for it, and I'm happy like when I can throw in one quarter and just beat the hell out of it.
Yeah.
I love that game. But,
It's a great game, even though,
Street Fighter versus Mortal Kombat, it's a classic rivalry.
It is classic. Everything else is sort of, to the side. I like Tekken 2, but Tekken's 3D, it doesn't enter the conversation.
Yeah.
So.
That's a different animal.
It is very different. Yeah. I'm going to keep it with the Sega Saturn.
Okay.
Which is going to be kind of strange, but I'm also shifting gears. I think the majority of them kind of follow like a similar theme through my picks. Nights into Dreams.
You love that
I
game.
love that game. That game is so cool to me, and I just, it's such a basic story, but it's so like well done artistically. Like, if you never played Nights into Dreams, as the name suggests, it's about dreaming. And so when you first start the level, you're running around as either, I know the boy's name is Elliot, I think the girl was Claire, maybe, but you run around, and before you jump into the night, you're in this 3D landscape. The whole level is 3D. And you can run around it as like your regular person, but this egg timer, it's literally this giant egg with a time on it, will come and like pick you up and wake you up, and then the game's over. But just everything about it is like, the controls are great. The whole story is about overcoming like your own fears and everything else like that. Music, it's just like a classic Sonic team. It's like right at the end of when they were doing like really, really good work. And it's just one of those games that always like stuck with me, like not many people have played it, which is unfortunate. And the Wii one didn't really capture the magic the same way, but yeah, it was just one of those games where I was like, I've always liked that whole sort of like alternate mindscape sort of stuff. You can get really wild with it, but yeah, just the way the story is told and everything about it is just an incredible game.
Yeah, I know. Like we were doing this thing for a while here at the shop where we'd like play a retro game and just sort of film ourselves doing it. We sort of changed that since then, but yeah, it was one of the first things you played was Nights into Dreams, and it's got that crazy controller. You have one here at the shop.
We do,
like
yeah.
Crazy expensive.
Yep.
But yeah, that's a weird game. Like I'd never played it, but I'd always known about it, and I'd never seen it. So when you were playing it, I was like, "What the hell's even going on?" That game is so weird.
It's so strange.
It's like Sonic, but it's not.
Yeah, it's like, it's not even about speed either. It's more precision and like acrobatics than Sonic is, where it's just running as quick as you can. And I really wish they kept going in that direction more as Sega, but they were running into trouble with the Dreamcast not selling well and everything else. So can't really blame them for Nights slipping through the cracks, but it's one of those like forgotten gems. It's really a great game if you ever have the chance to just sit down and play through it on a Saturn.
Yeah, I kind of want to, having watched you play it and knowing how much it means to you, it's like one of those games I feel like I want to sit down and give a shot.
Yeah.
And Virtual On's another one where it's like, it's one of those games I've always meant to play, but I just never got around to. So I think that's going to be fun is like maybe visiting some of these that we haven't played after this, because like, we take gaming so seriously between us. Like, it's one of the things that I care the most about, and I know you do as well. And so it's like anytime you come at me with something, I always like, I was like, all right, I need to try that. And like, currently on the Sifu, like that's a game that you were like telling me about, and I'd heard about it, and I was like, I don't know, is it any good? And then you were just like obsessed with it. And you put me onto it, and I'm like, yeah. And we both like notoriously difficult games. And that one's been like, I still haven't beat it, and you're like going on some crazy
no-hit runs and stuff. Yeah,
I'm like, that's nuts to me.
Yeah, it's just one of those games you can hop into and out of, so it's like, if you got 10, 20 minutes, just beat the crap out of some mooks. Always, a good stress relief. So
you gotta beat up mooks. I love
mooks, yeah.
So if you're listening and like you haven't heard of any of these games, trust us and check them out, because like we've played a lot of stuff.
A lot of bad stuff too.
A lot of bad stuff too.
Yeah, way too much.
But I guess continue on to good stuff.
Yeah.
I guess my number 9 pick would be going to the Super Nintendo.
Okay.
Metal Marines.
I've known you to
dude.
love some Metal Marines.
Like, it was made by Namco, and it is a turn-based strategy game.
Right.
But it's unlike any other strategy game that's been made since. And that game is the personification of just continuously being stressed out and on edge. So each faction has a map. They're on 2 different like screens essentially.
Yep.
So they have one over here and one over here, and it's grid based. So you have like a grid that can only have limited amounts of units, and the units are not like your traditional strategy where it's like you have a shop and you're putting out this to do this, but it's like you build like an energy factory so you can produce more energy, and you'll have these things called metal marines, which are mechs, and you can suit them up and you can upgrade them. You get missiles, anti-air missiles, and you can upgrade them so they're like dual missiles, and you have anti-aircraft. So it's like it's not like turn-based in the sense that you each take a turn, like you do something and then something happens. Like you go about your business generating money and energy and building, and like the buildings take a while to construct. So all you're doing is waiting and waiting for that thing to like get completed until all of a sudden you'll hear this noise, this awful noise will happen, which means you're about to be under attack. And they'll just bombard you. You don't know what's on the other person's map until you can send over like a missile. One of my tricks is I'll try to send a missile all the way to the end of their map because it's completely fogged out. You can't see anything. So once you get it to a certain point, it reveals the locations of where things are, so that next turn you know where it is.
The factory's here.
Yeah, you can try to hit it like a block before you know where it is, because they might have an AA and you'll try to outsmart it. But the AI in that game is so good, and it's just so difficult. The only level in that whole game where you can actually build a nuke in that game, and it takes up like a giant space of like your map. So you have to like make sure you have enough units available. But you can actually build a nuke, and the only level you can actually even do it in that game is the first level. So you just wipe them out, and then you just build your nuke, and then you just building a nuke takes time, so you still have to like send over your Marines or send some missiles over because they'll rebuild.
Right.
But it's cool because like when you destroy something in that game, like it scorches the earth, and you have to repair the earth before you can even put anything on there.
That's cool.
So it's like it's this maddeningly difficult game, and there's these awesome like little anime characters that are on these side of things. So it's like, like you'll bomb them and blast them, and then it'll be like incoming enemy message, and it's them like freaking out in the camera. It's like, oh, I'll get you for this.
It's like Advance Wars.
Except like way better and way more in depth. It's consistently been one of my favorite games since I was like 14, and it's a game that like is so unknown and deserves. It's like one of the best strategy games ever made, and to this day, I just beat that game like a year ago for the first time. Like that game is just so notoriously difficult, and it's so simple in its structure, but it's so challenging, and it's just you're always on edge. You just wait. You're just waiting for that alarm to go off to know you're under attack. And anytime you're under attack, you're just like, oh shit. Like what are they going to destroy? Like like I'm just building something up here, and then they wipe you out, and then you have no money, and it's it just becomes this nightmare, and it's the best.
That's awesome.
It's the best game.
It's so crazy how like a lot of the like Super Nintendo Genesis era games walked that fine line between like it's either so hard that it's Silver Surfer level hard, or it's just right, And to hear, the way that you're describing this game, it's like they just got that, lightning in a ball and had it the perfect difficulty where you're engaged the whole time, but you're not just getting like curb stomped. You feel like if you do everything right, you're going to progress and win, and that victory is like so much sweeter.
And it's beautiful too, because no way you play that game is ever the same, because each map you get 3 bases, and you put your bases to hide. So you have 3 bases altogether, and the whole goal is you have to destroy all 3 enemy bases. Whoever does that first wins. And you can even set up like dummy bases. So like you can put out a dummy base and have them attack that, but you hide your bases, and then the game is different every time, because if you hide your base at a different time, they're not going to attack you the same way each time. And unlike Advance Wars, where you can actually play Advance Wars a specific way and do certain moves and beat that game the same every time. This is just like completely undetermined. It's always like hectic, and it's always awesome. So highly recommend.
Yeah, I mean, you make it sound like amazing, like one of the best Super Nintendo games ever.
Easily.
So, yeah. So I'll kind of stay in the same vein with tactical turn-based RPG, though.
Okay.
My next pick, Shining Force 2 on the Sega Genesis. So, great game. Shining Force was, believe it or not, the first tactical RPG released in the USA.
Oh, no kidding.
But I played the second one when I was a kid because that's what my buddy let me borrow, and I was hooked. You know, if you've listened to the show before, you know how much I love tactical RPGs, and John also, huge fan of them. So that's what started that for me. That game is just like, it's so difficult. It's one of those ones that don't hold your hand at all. And there's so many like little secrets. You're upgrading your units. There's complete, you know, characters that you can miss. And if you don't go and talk to them or whatnot, you just don't get them. And then just the strategy of it was very different because unlike most RPGs, like if you're playing a Final Fantasy, you end the fight and your HP and MP are the same, right? You got to use, you know, Phoenix Downs to revive people. You got to use Ethers to get your mana back. In Shining Force 2, you can dump all your MP, and then that battle's over and your MP is all back for the next one. So it adds like a different strategy to it. Because it's not like, you know how a lot of players have this like, I have to have every potion because I might need them for the last boss sort of thing.
Yeah.
So knowing that you're gonna lose it anyway, it's gonna come back anyway, gives you like a whole different way of looking at, like I remember as a kid playing it and thinking how different it was to Final Fantasy because I could just dump all my MP and, you know, move forward. So, but yeah, I mean, like Fire Emblem we've talked about on the show before, how like we both love those games. And that was like my introduction to the tactical RPG genre.
I need to play Shining Force 2. The third one was on the Dreamcast.
Part 1, yeah.
Yeah, I played, the only one I ever played was the third one for the Dreamcast, and I really liked it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I never played the second one. I know I have the second one on my Genesis.
Yep.
And I plan on visiting that. I think the first one was on the Mega Drive.
I believe so, yeah.
So I have, I've got like, I have one of those, you know, cartridges on your, I think it's called an EverDrive, from my Genesis, where I have like a bunch of ROMs and stuff on there, and it actually plays Mega Drive games. So I have a bunch of those. Then that one's on there, as well as the original Phantasy Star. I need to play that too.
Oh yeah, that's a different one. That's cool though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember playing a ROM of Shining Force 1 after I played 2, and it just made me want to go play 2 again. Like I stopped like 20 minutes in, and I was like, I'm gonna play Shining Force 2 one more time. So.
Nice. I really need to play that, and it's one of those ones again. Like, see, I like that because I haven't played any of these so far,
right.
which is awesome.
Yeah.
So we both talked tactical RPGs a little bit. I'm gonna go traditional RPG, and I'm gonna go with Chrono Trigger.
Ooh.
So Chrono Trigger, back in the day, before I purchased it when it came out, I used to rent it from the video store down the street from me.
Okay.
And I would rent it so frequently that I was like, I basically just owned it.
Right.
I had all of the characters on that game. When you play Chrono Trigger, fun fact, if you play Chrono Trigger enough, your stats, you collect power tabs, speed tabs, magic tabs. If you collect enough of them, your characters gain a star next to their statistics instead of numbers, because you actually max them out and beat them. All of my characters had stars for stats. I could beat Lavos at the very beginning of the game with just Chrono.
Jeez.
I beat the fuck out of that game. And playing it again now, like,
Just brings you right back.
Dude, the music, the graphics, the story, like it's
Story's great. Yeah.
All the characters are awesome.
Yeah. Glenn.
Yeah, dude, Magus.
Yeah.
Like I love that game, and it's critically acclaimed.
Yeah.
A lot of people love it, and
Yep.
it is so justified in its place in gaming culture.
Definitely. I mean, most of the time you're going to have between Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger as the best Super Nintendo RPG. Yeah, it's classic. It's timeless. I mean, you literally travel through time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, plus the art style, Dragon Ball Z, like everything about that game, yeah, there's nothing wrong with it at all. There's nothing negative you can say about Chrono Trigger.
There's so many different ways you can beat that game. That game had so many endings.
Yeah.
I've seen all of them. I've done all of them.
Yep.
And it's so fun too because there's certain decisions you can make in that game that alter the course. Like you can play that game and not wind up with Magus in your party. Like that's a whole thing you have to do to like get him to do, and you have to do it properly.
Yep.
That whole thing in the when you're on trial and the decisions you make at the beginning at the Millennial Fair actually affect the outcome of the trial. There's so many great things, and that game was so in depth for the time. It's just it's unbelievable.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it makes it feel so, intricate and so much bigger than, it is megabyte-wise.
Yeah.
It's just on this little cartridge, but this game felt enormous when you first played it on Super, and it still does.
Absolutely.
That's the magic of it, is that it's such a good story, and it's told in so many ways that make it, and you do matter. Your name's Chrono. Like, your name's time.
Yeah.
Like, you're in the driver's seat for this crazy story, and seeing that interaction between, great story, great characters, great gameplay is just like, you don't get that often.
You don't. And the reason that actually beat out Final Fantasy VI for me was because I've actually never beaten Final Fantasy VI. I played that game 1,000 times, and I always kind of get to the same place and stop, which is like the end of the world. I always get to that spot, and I just stop playing it. But
you let Kef go in.
What was that?
You let Kef go in.
Yes, I do let Kef go in. Yeah. But yeah, like Chrono Trigger, the gameplay mechanics I like better than Final Fantasy II, where it's like I like that you don't have to get into fights all the time. You can avoid fights. The enemies are on screen. If you don't touch them, you don't fight them.
Yep.
It just makes it less frustrating, like in Final Fantasy when you're just trying to get somewhere.
You're walking in a hallway. And,
Yeah.
But
yeah, Chrono Trigger, easily one of the best RPGs I think of all time.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And like, honestly, those two games, Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI, I feel like I probably should have included them in my top 10, but again, we've talked about them before, so because of that, I tried to sort of steer away from them to make it more important. But yeah, everything you said, 100% true. That's like literally a 10 out of 10 game.
Yeah.
I never heard anyone complain about anything in Chrono Trigger.
Did you play the sequel?
Chrono Cross?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very different.
I heard the combat's amazing,
The combat's fun.
but I heard the game is just not as...
The story's just weird.
Yeah.
And then, it's, I think, a generation or two later. Like, all the characters from Chrono Trigger are, like, just history, basically.
Are there any returning characters at all?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but I don't believe so. I think it's sort of just, like, they're referenced, as figures in the world, but they're not, like, central to the plot in any way.
It's on Switch. I heard they ported it to the Switch, but I heard the port isn't great. For some reason, I heard there's like some weird like load times or something on all the consoles they got ported to. But
I can see that.
I wanna give it a shot because it's one of those games I always meant to try, but just never really got around to.
Yeah, I feel like it's probably better than I remember it being, but it's also one of those things where if you're a sequel to arguably the greatest RPG of all time, like, you better bring your A game.
And I feel like no one ever talks about those two in the same way.
They
like,
don't, no.
Most people never even played the second one.
Right, yeah. Chrono Cross is basically a forgotten game. A lot of people I've heard of do like it a lot, but just from my own personal experience, and again, I haven't tried it since PS1, where I was let down by it, but it's just one of those things where, you can't really... you can't be a sequel to Chrono Trigger.
Yeah.
You know, like that's a high bar.
Yeah, no, it really is.
So even if it's probably a solid 7 out of 10 game, I would imagine. But yeah, I'm biased, and I'll admit it.
That's fair. I mean, it's an easy bias to have.
Yeah.
So what are you not biased about and would be your next choice?
I'll say in the RPG realm,
Okay.
Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. So Morrowind to me was one of those games where it was so, like I never played a game where you could just pick up a cup off a table and that cup had value and someone would get mad at you for stealing that cup. Or you could walk across the room and there's a bookshelf and all of those books have words in them. All those books are different and you can pick them up, or you can read them, you can drop them. Like Morrowind felt like this fully realized 3D world where these creatures actually lived and moved around. You know, it felt real in a way that games before that just couldn't, because they weren't that detailed. Like, and just how strange of a world Morrowind is. Like they're literally, you're just a prisoner on a ship and they're like, okay, go out. And there's like a giant bug that you can ride between cities. All the races aren't your like standard fantasy races. The monsters are different. Like it's just one of those games where it's like, I feel like fantasy is one of those things now that's very like rigid.
Yeah.
You know, it's very Tolkien, D&D. And Morrowind was just like, no, we're just gonna go like absolutely crazy with whatever we do. Like there's a character in Morrowind that knows he's an NPC and like has transcended the game world. Like, and become like just everything about that whole game. Like the deeper you get into the lore, the weirder it gets. And it's just so creative. And it just as like that was the Xbox era. So I want to say probably,
It was Xbox One.
no, it was.
No, I mean like the first
First
Xbox.
Xbox,
Yeah. Yeah, sorry.
I want to say 2000 maybe.
Yeah,
Morrowind came
that
out?
sounds about right. I
Yeah.
remember being about 20 when that came out.
Yeah, and I was, you know, in my teens at that point, and just seeing something like that was just like absolutely like mind blowing.
Yeah.
You know, because I had played, you know, the Final Fantasies, the Chrono Trigger, and like we just talked about, amazing, incredible games, but like just how like the detail in that game. And I'm a book person, as you know.
Yep.
So whenever I play Elder Scrolls, I'm sitting there reading every single one of these books and like getting into the nitty gritty of it. So yeah, Morrowind was just like I said, this top 10 list for me is games that like changed me or changed the way I look at games or storytelling. And the fact that they built like this fully realized setting was something I'd never seen before.
An honor, to be sure.
That's fair. I don't have the same love for Morrowind that you do. I don't think I ever finished that one. I remember getting to the point where I had like, that was one of those games where it was like, certain ideas I don't think were like fully realized or could break a game in a way that you could back then, because it was so, you know, unique.
Yep.
Like I remember creating a character and just jumping and realizing you could like make your jump strong.
Yep.
So I actually got to the point where I could jump so high that it killed me.
Yeah.
So I couldn't jump.
Yep.
So it was just like, all right, well, that's kind of stupid. So it was like,
So in the beginning of Morrowind, if you go out of the first town in a certain direction, there's a wizard that falls right in front of you and kills himself. And he has a scroll on him that increases your acrobatics by 100. So if you cast that spell and jump, you'll kill yourself. But that's part of what I love about it is you can make spells, you can have, you know, your swimming or your jumping be, you know, crazy. It was a skill-based game.
Yeah.
You know?
and it was based on like if the more you used it, the more affluent you became in it.
Yep.
I think I appreciate that because I remember liking that when it came out. I just never finished it because I got frustrated with some of the mechanics. But I think it's just like I think they sort of painted themselves into a corner like they did with Starfield in that like I think Skyrim is like the best of what that kind of game can offer, including like the Fallouts, the Skyrims. So I think when Starfield came out, it was just kind of like, and that game was very like received very mediocre.
Right.
I think it's just I think Skyrim took that sort of world and made it as good as you can make it. So like even I'm like a little, concerned about whatever Elder Scrolls 6 is going to be.
I am too, but I see it in a different way because I see from like Morrowind being the pinnacle, 1 and 2 building up, and then Oblivion was a huge step down. And Skyrim is a great game, but the setting of just like some random Norway in, medieval versus this crazy Vardenfell where it's, giant ash mountains and all this weird stuff. Like Skyrim just felt like a generic fantasy game to me with like, some books that were in Morrowind sort of thrown in a cave somewhere.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
I think I think that's a great genre of game.
It is, yeah.
I think I'm just kind of, it's weird. I think like Skyrim spoiled me when I played that. I played the hell out of Skyrim.
I did too, and it's a great game. It's a
Yeah.
fun game, but just
I've had a hard time getting into any games that set up that kind of world since.
right,
And I think Baldur's Gate is like the first game to like, and that's not like the same kind of game,
right. That's different.
but it's like the first fantasy game to like really like bring me back. And I think before that it was Dragon Age, the one for the 360. Which
I don't remember which one that was.
I think it was Dragon Age 3 basically.
Yeah,
But yeah, like there's like fantasy's hard.
it is.
We've talked about that.
Yep.
But yeah, fantasy's hard, and I think Morrowind is an interesting selection, and I can see why you would love that game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just so weird to me.
Yeah,
And just that creativity and everything else, like how weird some of the books are, and that like, and you can just ignore that and
Yeah.
just go and have your hack and slash adventure. But all the thought that they put into it, and apparently, like when they're making it, one of the lead writers, this guy Michael Kirkbride, he would have. Like he would go to the creative director with like 2 ideas, one that was super outlandish looking and one that was like still weird, so that he would look at the 2 and pick the less outlandish looking one, which is what he wanted anyway.
that's awesome.
So he would just, but that, I just like, I was mind blown by that game when I first played it. It was just like so out there and so creative that I was like, this is like how things should be.
Well, not even last night's storm could wake you. I heard them say we've reached Morrowind. I'm sure they'll let us go.
That makes sense. That's a very Brendan pick. And
It-
I totally.
all
I
of
totally,
these are gonna be, yeah.
That's actually funny. Is we've had that conversation in store with like a couple of customers before.
Oh, yeah.
About like the Skyrim
Yeah,
Morrowind debate.
if you buy Oblivion here, I'm gonna tell you. It's supposed to be a swamp.
I don't think I played Oblivion a little bit. I didn't play too much.
I
of that one.
hated Oblivion.
Yeah.
But your next 7, 6, whatever were.
Super Mario World.
Yep.
I have to.
You have to, yeah.
Nah, I have to. And it's hard to even just pick Super Mario World. I'm just tempted to say Super Mario because every single one of those games has been so deeply influential in me as a gamer. But I'd have to say that the most consistently thorough throughout the years, the one that I've replayed the most, if it's not 3, it's Super Mario World.
No?
It's easily one of the best games ever made,
Yep.
easily one of the best platformers ever made, easily the best Mario game ever made. Yeah, there's something about that game. Like it doesn't matter what I'm playing it on.
Right.
If I'm playing on a handheld, if I'm playing on a TV,
Yep.
like,
Well, we had it as the shop game for
Yeah.
like a month recently.
Yep.
And people would just come in and we would, as a shop, play through, and we got through Star Road and everything else.
that's
so-
an amazing thing.
Yeah.
It's like going back to, I remember that when that game first came out, going to like Walmart and it would be on display at Walmart and those cool
Yep.
Super Nintendo displays.
Right.
And I didn't have a Super Nintendo at the time, so for me it was just like so amazing to see, the difference between graphics on the Genesis and that. I was
Yep.
like, oh, this thing's so much better. I want one. I want a Super Nintendo.
Because no one else creates these kinds of games. Now you're playing with power, superpower.
Yeah, but that game was just like even before I had a Super Nintendo, I was like entranced by it just by
Oh, yeah.
playing it on displays. we talked about this like ad nauseum in our Mario episode.
Yep.
If you haven't seen our Mario episode, go back and check it out. It'll be in the description below. We go into our top, Mario games of all time, and I mean, what more can I even say? It's Super Mario World.
It's Super Mario World. Yeah, it's almost as good as Mario Teaches Typing.
Almost.
Almost.
Not quite.
Not quite there. Not quite. No, but I agree. Yeah, it's Super Mario World. It's like, it's Schindler's List of video games. It's number one on every list. Like,
Yeah.
It has to be. So.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go sort of in the same direction. So
Okay.
I feel like Super Mario was the pinnacle, Super Mario World, pinnacle 2D platformers. I'm gonna go Banjo-Kazooie.
Really?
Banjo-Kazooie for the N64, yeah. I feel like Banjo-Kazooie is for 3D platformers what Super Mario World was for 2D platformers.
That is very
Very bold.
interesting.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is one of the only times where our generational gap, I feel the bias there.
Yeah.
I disagree, but please continue.
Okay, the music, characters, everything like that. All the different power-ups and moves that you would, learn throughout the game. There's a good amount of collecting, but not way too much. Like, I feel like DK64 overdid it in that regard. Yeah, all the different levels, the different mumbo-jumbo, turning you into different animals, like, everything about that game was like, this is what a 3D platformer should be. And yeah, I know you're going to disagree heartily.
No, I mean, I want to let you gush about it first. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
it's one of your favorite games for a reason. So.
yeah, I don't think like I could fire that game up and hear like the rareware, like weird squeaking sounds and like not smile. Like, just so much of it has so much character and like just that, it's classic Rare, it's jokes that should go over kids' heads but won't go over adults' heads. It's very tight gameplay, varied, set design. Each level is completely different. Yeah, I can't think of anything wrong with that game.
That's fair. So, I think this is one of those games, I've always hated that game.
Hated.
Yeah,
Wow.
I always hated Banjo-Kazooie. I always hated Donkey Kong 64.
I was not a very big fan of Donkey Kong 64.
I think it might be the generational gap. Just because, like, I always... to me, Banjo-Kazooie was like Bubsy. It was one of those wannabe mascots that was just like never cool enough to be a mascot, but still had like a couple games.
Dude, Bubsy.
I know, yeah.
So, you wanna be a video game star? For starters, grab all the items you see. There's plenty of them in each level. And if you get enough of them, you'll be in for some surprises.
That game's actually bad though. Like, Banjo is tight.
I'm not saying it's not a
gameplay-wise.
tight game,
Yes.
like as far as the gameplay is
Right.
concerned. I always hated the aesthetic. I always thought it was like goofy.
It is. It's supposed to be.
And I get that, but like
Yeah.
I don't like goofy shit. So like, I think like I always had a hard time. Like I didn't like the characters and like I just thought it was goofy and I didn't like that sort of aesthetic.
Yep.
So I've always had a bias for that game, like always. I don't know. I just never liked it. I thought it was corny, and I thought it was like it was just never for me.
Okay.
And that's a me thing.
Yeah.
And I know people love
Yeah.
People love Banjo-Kazooie. Come at me in the comments. If
You are
love Banjo-Kazooie,
going to-
I'm setting myself up for this. Come at me.
I feel bad now for putting this on my list because, yeah, people are going to come at you for that one.
That's okay.
I mean, don't you ever get to the point where you're like, I just have to accept the corniness of this, you know?
I have a hard time with that. So I think I've talked about it a little bit on the show. We might have talked about it in the Mario episode.
Possibly. Yeah, we did. We did. Yeah.
I have like a threshold for nonsense.
Yep.
Like Mario Wonder was I couldn't quite get over that.
Yep.
I don't like Mario Wonder. It's a little too goofy and too corny for me. Banjo-Kazooie is kind of the same thing. And like my anime, I like anime,
Yep.
but I'm very particular about my anime. Like the instance I see like a sweat bead or someone having like an exaggerated face and being, I'm like, I'm out.
Right.
Like I just can't. Like it to me, it's distracting, and it's like when I'm watching a movie and like they do something so stupid that it distracts me, and all I can notice is that change and that thing.
Okay. Yeah.
Like it's anything that takes me out of like the illusion or the.
But that is the illusion.
And I get that. And
Like,
I get that.
like when you watch Airplane, you're like, these people aren't making any sense.
When I watch Airplane?
Yeah.
No, because that's like a dumb comedy, and I
Exactly.
love dumb comedies.
Right. So Banjo-Kazooie is a corny game.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be corny.
Yeah. No, and I totally get that.
Right.
Yeah, it's just not my particular flavor. So like I was never able to get over that hump, I guess. It's just never for me.
Okay.
But yeah, like I it's weird. Like I have to acknowledge it because like I know that game is so beloved and so many
great
people
game.
love Banjo-Kazooie, and I know that's just me.
It is, yeah. It is just, well,
I'm the asshole.
I'm glad you're going to get hated on in the comments this video because,
okay.
yeah, oof, made yourself a target there.
Yeah.
You're up.
That's it. You don't want to.
I mean, I've already said that I think like everything about that game, like, I mean, dude, the main theme is Teddy Bear's Picnic. Like, how do you expect this to be like a highbrow sort of not corny? That's like,
You know what I think the thing is
Yeah.
too is like, by the time that came out, I was already probably like, when did that come out? Like 90,
98,
98.
maybe?
So I was like 18.
Right.
So like I'm like not playing something like that. You know what I mean? And even I guess like it's just like when you were probably like 12. Well, how old are you again? We're like 7
probably
years
like-
apart.
Yeah, I was probably like 12, 13.
Yeah, so
maybe younger.
Yeah,
around
so like,
that age.
That
yeah,
totally
early
makes
teens.
sense. Yeah. Like you were of that Nintendo 64 generations,
Right.
and that was like one of the big titles for that. And
Yeah.
I totally get it, and I know I'm just wrong.
Did you like GoldenEye at least?
I'd never really loved GoldenEye.
I'm gonna stop.
I would play it with my friends because
Yeah.
everyone would play it, but I was always like, this controls like shit, and this isn't fun.
Yeah.
But everyone loved it, so I would just shut up. I
You
like
need to do
Perfect
the
Dark
double,
more.
the double controls.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
the two.
I was a big Perfect Dark guy.
Perfect Dark was
The
really
original
good.
for the 64. I love that game.
That was a really good game.
I tried revisiting it, and it doesn't hold up, but
Not much
Yeah.
from the 64 does, like
that's rough.
to be completely honest.
Yeah.
But
Did you like? They made a bunch of Banjo-Kazooies, didn't they?
Yep.
Did you like all of them?
I didn't like Banjo-Tooie as much, and then the other one they made, like mainline one, was Nuts and Bolts for the 360, which is very different. So instead of it being like a platformer game, you actually build vehicles that you then drive around. It's very different. Like the first one, it's very simple. You know, your sister gets kidnapped in the old witch's, castle that's right above your house, and you have to go and save her. You know, it's one of those things. And then I really couldn't tell you what the plot of Banjo-Tooie was. I played through it, but I don't remember. I played through it once. I played through
fair.
Banjo-Kazooie like multiple times. So
Yeah, that's fair.
yeah,
You know what's funny too is like, just talking about 3D platformers. It's funny. It's not on any of my list, but it really should be. The new Ratchet and Clank for the PlayStation 5 is one of the best 3D platformers just ever made.
really.
Like ever, and it is hands down the most gorgeous looking game ever made.
Hey, I think I found the Wombat!
Oh dear. Let's show him how it's done.
And it's funny because like I don't bring that game up a lot because I feel like that series just doesn't get anywhere near the credit it deserves.
Right, it's like a forgotten series at this point.
But yeah, the new Ratchet and Clank, like, if just to throw it out there, like, if you haven't played that on PlayStation 5, I should bring that in for you to borrow. Like, the power-ups in that game is magnificent. The in-game graphics are like a Pixar movie.
Well, Ratchet and Clank was always a fun, sort of, goofy, corny.
But it's not goofy though. Like it's more like a Pixar movie, I think, where it's like it's serious enough and the characters are silly, but it's all like a little bit more highbrow, like that. It's like that Pixar thing where it's like, if you're a kid, it's enjoyable, but if you're an adult, like you appreciate it even more. That's just, I don't know, that like you should play that one.
Yeah,
like,
I'll check it out.
We both love those kinds of games. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm just a little miffed.
No, I mean, dude,
that you hate Banjo-Kazooie
yeah,
so much.
it just never did it for me.
That's
But
all right.
that's okay.
Yeah, well,
We very rarely disagree. It's fun to disagree.
we disagree pretty often.
No, we don't. So I guess number 6 for me. I think it's 6. I'll put it in the. I don't know.
Well,
I can't count.
the numbers don't count. It's in no particular order.
Nah,
so,
no particular order. Mega Man 2.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Playing that as a kid, that was one of the first games I beat. That game is hard as hell.
Oh, yeah.
Still to this day.
Yep.
The music in that game is like absolutely astonishing still. Every time I fire that game up, that intro music alone is like tremendous. In that game, every level, like the music is just amazing. Every stage has like just the most memorable music that like just sticks with you. The power-ups, the bosses, the difficulty level. It was like one of the very first games, and this is one of the things I think that it's going to make me sound like an old man, but I think a lot of kids today I think modern games and the way games are set up today, it does kids like a disservice in a lot of way, because something like Mega Man 2, where like that game taught you to be patient, where it's like if you tried to rush through something, you were going to die. Like you had to follow patterns, and if you killed something a little too soon and it respawned and you had to catch a block before it materialized, like it could throw you off and throw you into a pit or something. So it's like you had to be patient, you had to be observant, you had to, really have good reflexes, and the powers, when you got a new power, it wasn't explained to you, and it would do, some of them would do more damage to bosses than others, and none of this is explained in the game. It's like you get item 3, and it's like, what the hell does item 3 do?
Right.
But if you use it in a certain stage, maybe it helps. Maybe it's like a rocket pad that you stand on and it takes you across like a lava pit, so you don't have to take the jumping blocks. And if you don't have it and you went into that level, and it was also kind of like, the first like kind of open world game in a way where it's
you can just
pick whatever boss.
Yeah.
But if you go in the wrong level and you don't have a certain item,
this can be much harder.
Yeah, like like Heat Man, like that level, like there's a whole big lava pit, and if you don't have the item that's the rocket ship, you have to go on blocks that fade in and out in a certain pattern for like a whole 2 or 3 screens, and it's just miserable.
Right.
That game, like still to this day, every time I play it, I get the dumbest smile on my face. Everything about that game is like perfection. I think it is one of the best and hardest like 2D platformers ever made. And out of all the Mega Man games in the series, except for the X games, like it's my favorite. Like
that's what I was going to ask about, is why the X games wouldn't.
The X games are so good.
They're incredible.
Yeah, but like Mega Man 2, like is just, that game it's like still one of the most influential games ever for me.
Yep.
And it's one of the games that turned me into like a true gamer, where it's like, as a freaking 8 or 9-year-old, learning that game and beating that game, was such a, accomplishment.
Right.
Where I know adults who still haven't beaten Mega Man 2.
I mean, it's like you said, it's timing, it's skill, but it's also pattern recognition, it's thinking, it's planning, it's all of those things.
Yeah, it's all the things that I love as a gamer, and it challenged me as a kid and gave me this skill set that helped me grow to and appreciate other kinds of games too. And I just miss that a little. In some games, they hold your hand too much, and I like the idea that if you're dead, you're dead, and you didn't pay attention. And do it again, and learn.
So just to clarify, you picked Mega Man 2 because that one is the one you played first. But would you say that that's true of all of the Mega Man or Mega Man X games? They all have that sort of what you like about it?
They do, but I think the second one for me is more just everything about that one. I've played all of them, but the second one is just definitively the best one. And I include that with the X games and that. And I love the X games. They're amazing.
Right.
But Mega Man 2 out of all of them, it was just it was the best levels, the best music, every level, I will just I catch myself humming along to the music every time I'm playing those.
Right.
It's just all so memorable. It's this perfect game, and none of the other Mega Mans, in my opinion, captured the essence that one does. That one is just it's just the Mega Man game, for me anyway. That was just always the best one.
Nice. All right.
But I love all the Mega Man games.
Yeah,
I'm a big
great.
fan of the old Blue Bomber.
Yep.
But Mega Man 2, man.
Yeah.
All the way. Have you ever played that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Mega Man 2 was great.
No.
Yeah. But I mean, I grew up more with the X series.
That makes sense.
And the original ones were things we went back to and played.
Yeah.
So missing some of the, different moves and stuff that you were able to do.
Yep.
Would, it felt
more limited, I'm sure, right? Yeah.
It's like when modern kids come in and play Super Mario World, but they can't wall jump. And they're like, wait, what? I should be able to wall jump here. It's sorry, kids. They hadn't invented that yet.
Yeah.
You gotta play without it.
That is interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I think they're great games, and yeah, it's just, I would say if I was adding a Mega Man to mine, it would probably be one of the X games. But
That's perfectly fair.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just a generational thing, probably.
And you're probably right. I think just same way that Banjo Kazooie for you is
Right.
it's just that generational gap. But I would love to hear your number 5, but I think we're gonna have to wait until the next episode for that.
So thanks for tuning in. That was the first half of our top 10 greatest games. If you don't agree, you're not a gamer list.
That's such a bold statement.
Well, you come up with the titles. I just have to go with it. But if you guys have any, comments, if you want to, let us know how wrong we are about Banjo-Kazooie, or if you want to share your top 10, leave it down in the comments below. Like we mentioned earlier, this is the New Game Plus podcast. New Game Plus, Kingston, New Hampshire, the coolest retro video game store / arcade anywhere.
I would say so.
Probably
This place
anywhere.
rules.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Man.
I mean, at least in New Hampshire, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Kingston, definitely.
Oh, 100% in Kingston.
We have Kingston
lockdown, dude.
Yeah.
100%. And Brendan is right. If you want to tell me how wrong I am about Banjo-Kazooie, just let me know in the comments. And I'm more interested in hearing what you guys like. I want to hear what your top favorite games are, because I don't think anybody's particularly right or wrong, but I just like to hear what other people's favorite games are, because gaming is huge.
Right.
It's the biggest part of our lives, I think.
Definitely.
So much time wasted. But you're not wasting your time watching this episode. See that?
That's true. Yeah. They could be multitasking.
Could be.
They might just be listening.
Yeah. Do you listen to us on the toilet, when you're at the band, a skill saw? I don't know.
Just doing the dishes.
Yeah.
Let me hear the New Game Plus. Yeah.
Yeah. Let us know in the comments if you're on the cam watching the show. I'm very interested. But yeah, part 2 coming up soon. And I guess that's it for us today, yeah?
That's it.
All right.
Thanks, guys.